What is going on, my Pardon My Pancreas listeners and watchers? I've got a special guest for you today who's going to jump in. We have a chat about goal setting and New Year's resolutions and how you can have the winning mindset going into 2021. So excited to share with you. Have this chat with Chris Ruden, and let's get into our theme song.
I've spent the last 10 years pushing the limits while identifying trends and patterns in my type 1 diabetes management. Follow along as I learn, apply, and share the fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle strategies that I've learned from diabetes experts around the world. The real question is, how can we live fearlessly with diabetes while maintaining stable blood sugars? This podcast is here to give you the answer. My name is Matt Vandevecht, head coach and co-founder of FTF Warrior, and welcome to Pardon My Pancreas.
Welcome back to the Pardon My Pancreas podcast. Today I've got a super fun guest for you guys. A little bit of a secret towards the end we're going to drop, but today we've got Chris Ruden on, the one-armed diabetic who is the powerlifting king of the diabetic world. Thank you so much, Chris, for jumping on with us today.
For sure. I appreciate you having me, man.
Absolutely. We got some interesting times. Last night being New Year's Eve, the end of 2020, the worst year of all time for many. We got resolutions coming through the door, mindset, goals, shifts, new year, new me. I'd love to get your perspective on that. First question, do you have any resolutions that you made?
So I think the whole resolution thing is stigmatized bad on both sides. There's people who I really want to make resolutions, or there's people resolutions are stupid. Resolutions are just another word for goals. And when you break down the basic concept of a resolution or a goal, what do you have a goal? Is it specific? And the most important thing, are you actually going to act on it? I think resolutions have a very bad stigma because people use old habits for new goals. They have the 2020 mindset for 2021 goals, and that'll never work. It just won't. It's a nice idea. It feels good. Nice fantasy, but unless you plan to act on it, it won't really work. So for me, anytime I write down goals, which I do, I created my little vision. I want to say vision board, but let's be real. I put 12 to 14 pieces of computer paper on a desk, and I took a semi-dried out red Sharpie, and I just wrote. Stream of consciousness, just wrote all of the things I wanted, all of the goals, all the things. For me, that's how I do it, But every time I wrote something down, I took a second and I was like, am I actually going to do this? Am I willing to put in the work to actually do this? And once you get that verbal or that mental confirmation, yes, I'm going to do this, how? So that's for me, how I make those New Year's resolutions or goals a reality, at least from the start. You have to be willing to actually act them out because, everyone's goal is to be a millionaire and to bump The Rock down from his claim to fame and be a better actor than him and have a Lamborghini. And everyone has dreams or fantasies, but your goals, are you going to do them and how? For me, that makes the biggest difference.
I think that's a huge distinction of, are you going to do it, and accepting mentally, am I going to do this? Is this realistic?
I mentally accept that I want a helicopter. I want a helicopter. Don't know where I'd park it.
That'd be sweet.
Don't know where I'd fly it. Probably can't afford it. But mentally, I want a helicopter.
Yeah.
That's not on my 2021 goals, though. You can have your dreams and things that you want that can be completely outlandish, but don't make the goals that are important to you outlandish by not having a plan to act them out.
Yeah, super important. I know a lot of people focus on that new year, new me day where it's this great reset, which, I'll be honest with you, I'm one of the dudes who says New Year's resolutions are crap, but it's because they're approached the wrong way, right? It says, I'm waiting for this one day of the year where I get to set new goals, and they wait for it. And I think that's just the silliest thing. But I will say that reset option is powerful for a lot of people. It gives them the opportunity to start fresh. It gives them an excuse to say, okay, today is the day I have to make a change. But if you don't know how you're going to do it, if you don't actually commit to doing it, it's not going to happen. And I think that's where that gets such a bad reputation of resolutions.
There's a book, I forgot the author, but it's called The Power of Moments. And a lot of people don't make a change until there's that moment, until rock bottom, so to speak. For me, getting diagnosed with diabetes kind of helped me make that shift, or I just made better decisions because of that moment. And sometimes New Year's is that moment for people to reset. Sometimes it's not. it shouldn't be. And I was a big proponent, like just like you last few years of like, oh, New Year's resolutioners, you guys, I just posted a funny video where the guy's like, let us be in the gym for 3 weeks. Let us, not know how to use machines. Let us do this because by February we'll be gone. Let us do our thing. And it was really funny, but like it's sad because a lot of people don't plan to commit. They plan to start. A lot of people plan to start, but not a lot of people plan to commit. And I agree with you in that you should be willing to seek it out just for yourself, for your own like potential. I don't believe in the new year, new me thing really, because it's more like new year, realized potential you. That's what it really is. The potential, you are already you. It's just now you have to let yourself be yourself fully, unguarded and unbothered, like become what you could have been last year. And now you have a plan to do it this year. That's how I see it.
Yeah, that new potential. I think that's a great way of laying it out, of especially acknowledging that day one, there we go, that day one of the new year isn't going to be the new finished product of you. It's the new opportunity. Let's start something fresh. Let's work towards it. There's a journey, right? I'm going to lose 20 pounds. Well, you didn't lose 20 pounds overnight, right?
Exactly.
Let's continue the journey. And I think that, while it is a powerful starting point, if you've got that momentum, you mentioned the power to change. Is that what it's called? Power.
Yeah. Power of moments, basically.
Power of moments. Yeah. I had a realization about 2 months ago that I need to make some changes in myself. I could have waited until New Year's, or I do what I did, which was start that day. It's like this needs to change. And I think the power of moments can also be summed up in, does it hurt enough for you to cause change? Are you in enough pain right now to make that change happen? If you're not in enough pain, if you don't see that as worth it, you're not going to put the effort in. But if you're in a spot where you're like, this is the worst thing ever, maybe my blood sugars are at 500, that sucks. I'm going to figure out how to change it. But if I don't see that as the worst thing ever, I'm probably not going to change.
This is where a powerful concept that I use called negative visualization. It sounds terrible, but a lot of times we're not in that rock bottom moment. We're not at that blood sugar of 500. We're at that blood sugar of 180, right. In life, not just diabetes, but we're at that purgatory of like, it's not bad enough to change, but it's not good enough to where we want to be. So we're just coasting. Mm-hmm. And that's where negative visualization and positive visualization help you create behavior. So negative visualization be like, yeah, I'm 180, but like, imagine if I was 180 for the next 40 years. Imagine if that 180 crept up to 200 and then 250. Imagine if I didn't do the things that I say I wanted to. And I look back 10 years from now, knowing that I could have, but I chose not to. Not because life forced me not to, but I chose not to. That negative visualization, it's a vision board is very powerful, but we have the other side of things too, like a negative vision board. Like, what would happen if I didn't commit to these goals? What would happen if I didn't make these changes? How would the people around me that I say I care about and that I love and that I want to serve, what would happen to them if I didn't accomplish the things that I want to accomplish? Oh, that feeling sucks.
Right.
Well, let's avoid that feeling. Let's not get to rock bottom. Let's visualize rock bottom so that we can avoid it. That's a super powerful tool that I use a lot.
Oh, yeah. And, I didn't know it was called negative visualization, but about 2 months ago, when I recognized changes that I needed, it was due to that. My email list knows that I went to a Tony Robbins event virtually. And at that event, he walks you through that negative visualization process where he's like, okay, imagine this is what's happening. And then it gets worse. Now I want you to imagine the worst case scenario. Now worst case scenario of the worst case scenario, and just walk through the next 20, 30, 40 years. And by the end, you're just filled with this regret. And you're like, oh my gosh, what if it got that bad? I do need to make a change. And that's where it's day one, let's go make a change now.
Yeah,
and
I think that's a super smart concept.
Process.
Yeah. For sure. Emotions are motivating, Mm-hmm. The bad thing is when you feel okay, that staleness of okay, like that purgatory, like I said, it's hard to make a change because you're like, it's not too bad. But 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you don't want someone to ask you like, hey, how was your life? And you're like, that's, no one ever wants that. No one ever aspires to have, but it's okay. It's pacifying and it's dangerous. Like, I think that's so much worse than hitting rock bottom because rock bottom sucks, but you can only go up. But in that purgatory state, you can just cruise. And cruising is a slow death for me. For me, I'm not okay with that. And if you decide that you're not okay with it, you have to decide what you're okay with. Not every goal has to be a six pack or a perfect unicorn blood sugar or building businesses or a helicopter, you know? But you have to decide, you have to set your minimums and what you want. And if your daily life is not aligning with what you want, you're going to be unhappy. And if you can control that, you're going to be even more unhappy. And unfortunately, you can control that. So let's avoid that by doing the things that we can control, setting goals that we're actually going to act on. And you don't have to, like you said, lose 20 pounds today. You don't have to lose 1 pound today. You have to go for a walk. You have to make one better choice. Let's break down those huge goals or those important goals into small, seemingly insignificant things that we know will compound and get us to where we want to be 3 months from now, 3 years from now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that you mentioned something that was very powerful, that you control how you react, you control your emotions. I think it's good that I just set something up right here to get our book collection matching. For everybody listening, The Obstacle is the Way book I just pulled up. I noticed at the beginning of the episode, Chris has got this on display, the only book on display out of his whole bookshelf. And it was the one book that I brought to this talk because I wanted to reference it. Let's talk about Stoicism a little bit and just kind of how that applies to decision making, goal setting. What are your thoughts on that?
So that book specifically, and we've talked about this before, I will always talk about this. This was the pivotal book for me. Before I had books, I had that book. And that book, Ryan Holiday is my top 2 authors, because there's another author that has kind of bumped him, and we'll talk about that in a second. But definitely the most impactful book that I've ever read. And that might not be the book for you, but for me it was. And it's not the entire book that was impactful. It was a few moments that really stopped me from pitying myself, stopped me from blaming everything else. It stopped me from being a backseat driver in my life and allowed me to take the wheel. Not in a way where I'm like, I control my life, but in a way that, like, I control my thoughts. Yeah, but it's hard. It is. It definitely is. But it taught me how to stop reacting and start responding. It taught me how to differentiate between what's happening to me and what's just happening, and how I'm interpreting, how I'm storytelling, and how I'm reacting because of it. Control is a hell of a thing, because this year might seem like we had zero control, and we had zero control of the pandemic, of politics, of anything. We had zero control. But guess what? Last year, 10 years ago, we had the same lack of control in the same things. Can't control the flu, can't control the politics. You never will. 2021, 2041, you will never control politics. You will never control anything. Influence, maybe. Control, never. But what you had 10 years ago is the same thing that you had last year and the same thing that you have next year. Your ability to control or domesticate the thoughts that run crazy in your head. The thoughts, the beliefs, the actions, the reactions, those can be controlled. But like the gym, you will not be a world record powerlifter today because you decide to start trying to control things. But when you start taking a second to be like, hey, this thought that crossed my mind, do I need to invest in it? Perfect example. When writing a book for myself, or when doing a business or a blood sugar. Oh man, it's never going to work. That's a thought. That's a thought. We don't have to crush it. We have to address it and be like, that's a possibility. But is this the thought I want to invest in? Is this the thought that I want to put energy in? Just because it's a possibility doesn't mean also that I could write that book, that I could better my diabetes management, that I could better my relationships. Just because you have one thought doesn't mean that's the thought you have to invest in. So control comes down to very minimal things: what you think, what you believe, how you act, and how you react. Unfortunately, that's the only thing you can control. Fortunately, that's the only thing you can control.
Well, I think that's such a great question too. Like, which thoughts do you invest in? And it could be, what if this all goes wrong? Or what if this all goes right? Like, it can go both ways.
It definitely can. And like, in given a choice, we tend to spiral out or catastrophize. We tend to be like, but if it goes wrong, then this is going to be terrible. Listen, that's a protective mechanism. Don't be mad at your body or your mind for trying to protect you, but don't run with a protective mechanism just because it's there. Take a second and be like, I appreciate you trying to protect me from potential disaster, but also I believe in that I'll be able to recover from it if it did happen. And the other possibility is that it might work. The other possibility is that I might not fail to rock bottom. I might stumble, but I might also recover. And I choose to recover because I'm in control of my thoughts, regardless of what happens. I don't know if it's in Obstacle is the Way or Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, but he does a specific story of a boxer who was, I don't know if you remember this story. He was imprisoned wrongly, and he was in prison for like years.
Yep, that's his book.
And he said, yeah, it's incredible. It's in this one. Yeah, and he was talking about, I'm just paraphrasing, but he was talking about how the guy chose to go to prison. He didn't, but he did. In his mind, he chose to go to prison. He chose to wear the clothes. He chose to not act like an inmate. He chose to never give away his peace of mind. So in that way, he was never imprisoned mentally. Physically, maybe, but mentally, no one could take from him what was always his control: who he was, how he thought, and how he reacted. His surroundings might have changed. His environment might have changed. Our pandemic might have changed our surroundings and our environment. But who you are, what you wake up with, and what you go to sleep with mentally is always yours to control. So when that goes haywire, we tend to, who can I blame? Who can I outward? But who has the responsibility? Not the fault, but who has the responsibility to manage that? We do. That's the best and worst thing ever, because we look at it and we're like, oh, I'm to blame. Blame doesn't matter though. The great thing is, like, I have responsibility. I have ability to respond to this stuff, and then I can make things better. So I think that control element is so important. And I think it's pretty epic that we have the ability to always do something. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, and I think it falls back on other similar concepts of like internal locus of control versus external locus of control. And you mentioned responsibility, not blame. I can take responsibility for my thoughts, my actions. And then you also, actually in that story with the boxer, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe upon being released, they offered him some kind of monetary reward for the crap he went through because he was wrongfully convicted, and he denied it. Said, I don't need that. You don't need to pay me because I chose to be in there. And it was just this crazy mind-blowing thing of like, you said no to all of that and just decided to start fresh. Because
I think that's pretty crazy. And it's tough because we've all gone through some stuff this year. There's people who've been out of their homes. There's people who've been like poverty, all kinds of stuff, from like the racism that's also happened to politics. There's been so many issues, and those issues have also happened before in the past too. So it's not that like we're pretending like that never happened. What I'm trying to do for people, I'm not trying to minimize the struggle. I never will. We all have our struggles. It's the same thing with my arm. It's not my fault that I have this, but it is my responsibility in what I do with it. And before, I would consider myself irresponsible because I let myself spiral. It was easy. I'm not trying to be an ableist and saying that everyone should be a motivational speaker. What I am trying to say is that everyone should take a second to realize like their value doesn't have to change because their circumstances do. They don't. Your value does not have to diminish. And we tend to tell ourselves stories that let ourselves lower our value because of our perceived circumstances. Something I've learned recently, there isn't good and bad, really. There's effective and ineffective. I don't do bad things. I don't have bad blood sugars. I don't do bad blood sugar management tactics. I have effective ways of treating and ineffective ways of treating. And I'm choosing more effective strategies. I'm not trying to demonize what I do in a moment. I don't believe in bad diabetics. There's no such thing as a bad diabetic. Diabetes is kind of bad. It sucks. It's not a good condition, but we're effective in ways and ineffective in ways. And we can't take that personally to our character because of something that happened or a way we reacted. We can take a step back and say, hey, that was less ineffective than I would like it. So in the future, I'm going to choose to be more effective.
Yeah, and I think that I wanted to kind of circle back something you mentioned like 10 minutes ago. You mentioned react versus respond. Can you go deeper into that?
Absolutely. So when you stub your toe, you react. You're like, oh my God, oh, that hurts so bad. This is so terrible. No time to think. No time to be like process anything. You're just like, boom, that happened. Sometimes it's traffic for people. Someone cuts you off, you're like, mother, but in normal, you would never do that. It's different for everyone. And I notice for me, that space between what happens and what we do is larger in some areas in people's life and smaller in some areas in people's life. You snap for some things, but some things you handle so well. At work, you might handle the biggest catastrophe in the world, and they're like, wow, you're so level-headed. But then someone cuts you off in traffic, like, you're a hothead. What's the difference? It's that space we tend to give ourselves, and the giving into the immediate knee-jerk reaction instead of a chosen response. Responses are well thought out. Reactions are quickly. We give into the emotion that happens. Emotion is normal. I'm not saying we should be stonewalled, but letting emotion rule us and not domesticate the emotion that happens, that is a reaction, not a response. So in 2021 or moving forward, I encourage people to take a step back, take a second, and not just react out of emotion or despair or frustration, but take a moment to respond in an effective, not ineffective way.
Yeah, and this concept obviously falls back on Stoicism and The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, but this feels like a promotion for the book. It's not. We just like it.
This concept, it goes way past Stoicism or Ryan Holiday or the book that we like, in all walks of life, whether it's psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, anything. All of these things follow the concept of controlling what you can control, focusing on effective thoughts, focusing on things that won't make you worse, but will make you better in a sense. Effectiveness, mindfulness, these concepts, whether it's in Buddhism or any religion or thought process, or it doesn't matter. Successful, effective thinking focuses on internal, what you can control, and less about external, what you can't control. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, Effective People, talks about the circle of concern versus the circle of influence. Basically, focusing on what you can control, not focusing on what you can't control. Successful people, success leaves clues, and not just success, but effectiveness leaves clues.
Absolutely. And in that kind of realm, in connection to the response versus reaction, how can one improve upon that when it's hard to see tangible evidence? It's more of how do you feel and how do you respond? How do you improve on something like that response timing?
So a buddy of mine wrote this book. It's called Everyday Legacy. And he talks about a wall. When you're this close to a wall, can you see the painting? Can you see the wall? You just see this small speck, But when you take a step back, you can slowly start to see a bigger picture, It's almost like sitting at the front row of a movie theater. You're like, oh, you got to do so much. But when you take a step back, you're like, oh, this is what it looks like. This is the bird's eye view. This is the top-down view. It's very hard to see the full picture when you're surrounded and you're immediate, and you don't choose to take control of the situation by taking a step back and saying, let me look at this from the other person's perspective. Let me look at this from an effective perspective. Is this a 10 out of 10 doomsday situation? Well, it's not, because you're not dead. And if you were dead, it wouldn't be a problem anymore anyways, So like, that's not an issue. So it's not a 10 out of 10. 9 out of 10. Is it really the worst thing possible? Are you going to recover from it? If you're not going to recover from it, you don't need to worry. If you are going to recover from it, you don't need to worry. If it's not your problem to solve, you don't need to worry. But if it is your problem to solve, you don't need to worry, because you have to solve it. So it sounds like when we take a step back, we have a lot more control and effectiveness than we think. But that immediate emotional, disastrous response, protective mechanism, like we said, wants us to knee-jerk and be like, bad, not us. Because when it's our responsibility, it hurts, because we have to do something about it, because we have to take it personally, so to speak. We have to reflect inward, that introspection, and we're just like, oof, you probably did that wrong, and you probably want to do that better next time. It sucks. It sucks to do that. It sucks to look at a blood sugar and be like, I made a mistake. We don't like to admit to that. No one does. It's not really a mistake, but it's just, again, we did it in a less effective way, and now we have to learn forward that we need to be a little bit more effective. You can never be effective when you're this close to a wall in describing the big picture. You can't. You can never be effective when you're heated in an argument and you say things that cause pain. You can never be effective when you see a number as an emotional thing. You can't. You see 300 and you see your future death. There is a space between 300 and your future death. I'm just going to let you know that right now. I'm going to lose my leg or my arm. There is a space between having a sugar that you don't like and being limbless. There is. But when you close that gap on purpose to perpetuate that reaction instead of taking a step back, taking a second and responding, we're not going to make it better. If anything, we're going to make it worse. So what people can do is take a second, calm yourself, and look at all the angles, not just the one that's immediate to your emotional response. It's hard for me too. It's always going to be difficult because it's what our mind usually goes to. But just because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned that space between 300 now and your inevitable losing of limbs or death or whatever it is. And I think that a lot of people, myself included, have missed this connection between fear, anxiety, and all those types of emotions being connected with an imagined future. Too much focus on the future that hasn't happened yet, so it's not even realistic to think about. Or the sadness, depression, those types of emotions being too much focused on the past. We forget to live in the now. Forget to realize that those future things, they're not necessarily going to be true. It's not factual yet. And the things in the past, we're putting too much focus on that. Those already happened. You can't change them. And so realizing that you can live in the moment, accept that, try to figure out a way to move past that challenge or that obstacle, and then move on with your life.
I'm going to terribly paraphrase a quote that I heard, but basically it was saying that pain is never now. Pain is either relived from the past or future visualization of pain. It's generally never now, you know? Oh, but I'm hurting right now. Yes, but where you're hurting from is imagination of the past, maybe something you once had, maybe some bad thing you once had or good thing you once had that you no longer have or you're reliving, or you're hurting now because of imagining things in the future on a way of life that you don't want to live. Genuinely speaking, what's happening now is kind of neutral in the sense of the sugar is a number, whether it's low, normal, or high. We're taking that and we're telling ourselves a story. There's what happens, and then there's the story we tell ourselves about what happened. And if we're in the cockpit, we're in the director's chair, and we're deciding to tell ourselves a story that's ineffective, one, that kind of sucks, and two, that's great because we can change it, which is awesome.
Yeah, so true. And that key of perception, you told me a story, I don't know, like 6 months ago of a car crash, right? You've got a bridge that falls, crushes cars, and you're stuck in traffic because of that accident. Well, there's two stories being told. One, I'm stuck in traffic. This is the worst thing ever. What the heck? This always happens to me. Actually, it's a different story than what you told me, but it's similar. Or two, you could have died under that bridge. Be thankful. You know, there's a positive way to look at it and a negative. I think the example you gave me was an actual car crash, and one is my car is totaled, oh no, versus I'm alive. Thank God. You know, and it's just these stories we tell ourselves of how we view what's going on around us that shape our reality ultimately.
It's what's funny about that. You can take any story. Let's take the car crash thing. There's I'm stuck in traffic. There's the bridge down. I'm going to be late. Everything sucks. There's the, oh my God, thank God I didn't get crushed. Mm-hmm. And then there's the real story. The real story is you're in your car and the bridge fell. That's it. That's literally all that's happening. That's the story with no storytelling. That's the event. The event has no emotion. The number, the blood sugar, when it's counting down on your meter, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, number. Anything after that number is the story you choose to tell yourself, because the only thing that happened was a number popped up on a screen. That's it. But from that number, we get that reaction. Boom. And we tell ourselves a story. We see 75, like, ooh, I'm perfect. Oh God, I'm such a good diabetic. I'm going to take a picture of this. oh, it disappeared. Let me turn it back on so I can take a picture and let everyone know, oh, the glare is showing my phone. It has to be perfect. I want it to be just as perfect as the blood sugar. Or that 200 and we turn off the meter real quick because we don't want to see it. Or we're like, we stare at it for a little bit and we're like, if I keep having high blood sugars, I'm going to get complications. Mm-hmm. And then boom, spiral. That if-then philosophy. We build a whole story, but the only thing that happened was blood went into a little test strip that allowed us to give us a number, mm-hmm. a representation of an acute point in time. Is it?
Yeah. And I think a great continuation of that thought is that we have this physiological response oftentimes where, I'll test my blood sugar. I'm like, I'm probably like 130. I'm feeling good. Oh, 62. I get shaky. I get sweaty. Now I feel low because I saw that number, attached a thought process to it. And now all of a sudden I'm spiraling, panicking. Oh no, how fast am I dropping?
So, and that thing you just said, who attached the thought process?
Exactly. Yeah, that was a number. That's it. And I said, oh no, this is a bad, scary number.
And right? This is where I'm going to counter the counter again. Be like, I didn't attach the thought process. It just happened. That just means subconsciously we've taken all of our ability to be mindful. We've taken all of our forceful response or our active response, and we've become passive. We've allowed the pattern, the normal, to take over. And how I explain this now is a thermostat. If your thermostat is set at negative, if your thermostat is set at ineffective, let's say that, anytime you're effective, your thermostat will bring you back down because your thermostat always wants to keep you in homeostasis where you're comfortable, your pattern, your level. So if you don't adjust your own thermostat, if you don't adjust from ineffective to effective, you will always pull yourself back down to the comfortable level of ineffectiveness. And it's only you who will change that thermostat. You can't be mad that everything is going the way it always goes, because it's the story you always tell yourself, because it's the thermostat you set. It's the level you have set to be comfortable at. And until you change that actively, which sucks, it's hard, it's difficult, it takes minute by minute, just like diabetes, work. You can't expect a different pattern without breaking it.
Yeah, and that can be very uncomfortable, but necessary.
It will be. I'll just promise. I'm not even going to give you any hope. Like, it will suck. I go through it regularly when I decide to change my patterns. Mm-hmm. And it sucks. It will suck for everyone, but it will suck for your benefit. And I promise you it will be better to set your thermostat at a way that sees you effective and not ineffective.
Totally. So adjusting thermostats moving forward, obviously we just crossed into 2021. People have new goals. They want to become better versions of themselves. They've got these goals set out in front of them. How do they apply these principles to the new year? How do they make those changes last?
Let's make it simple. It has nothing to do with external actions. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to write more emails. You don't have to write that book. You don't have to manage your diabetes better. Let's take it at ground zero. What I encourage people to do is to take more time to respond in a way that will make you proud, and respond in a way that will make your actions and resulting actions effective. So ask yourself this: is what I'm about to do effective or ineffective? Let's create a system of checks and balances with that one question. Blood sugar. We see something that happens, knee-jerk response immediately wants to happen. Give yourself a second to take a step back and say, is what I'm thinking, is what I'm feeling, is what I'm about to do effective or ineffective? Would you ever actively take a route home that is an extra hour when you don't need to? No, because that's ineffective. So when you think about things, whether it's diabetes or your life, would you ever actively want to do something that's ineffective? No. So don't do that. Catch yourself. You have to catch yourself. You have to be real with yourself. You have to give yourself a longer space to make a better choice, to have an effective response so that you have an effective outcome. Give yourself the ability to choose effectiveness over ineffectiveness.
Love that. Increase that space. I think that's also where that whole if I'm angry, count backwards from 10 process comes from. Increase that space before you react so you have time to respond and not ruin a relationship.
100%. And whether that relationship is with a person, a loved one, your diabetes, your management, your business, your mental health, give yourself the space to make better responses instead of knee-jerk reactions.
Totally. Thank you for sharing all that, dude. That was a lot of in-depth mindset gold.
I wish I could say I had notes or anything, but anytime we have conversations, man, it's just like we are able to really focus on what we're trying to help with, and not just other people, but ourselves. Because I know for you, especially for me, when we say these things, I'm walking myself through the things that I'm not doing effectively. And I'm like, this is just another reminder to choose effectiveness. And it's not something you choose weekly or monthly or have on a board that you forget about and it gets dust on. It's every moment. You have to be in it. You have to live presently, to live mindfully, to live effectively. And once those steps aren't kind of created, you can't skip steps. So present, mindful, effective, and that can carry you daily, weekly, monthly, yearly to the better quality of life that you aspire to have. You just have to be willing to do the work in the process.
Totally. Yeah. And for everybody listening, watching, Chris and I have got a special announcement to share with you guys. But before we do, I want to ask you, Chris, if they've got a place they can find you at, whether it's social media, a website, anything exciting coming up in the future.
Absolutely. So everything is just my name, Chris Ruden. Instagram, YouTube, getting back to that, posting more IGTV, and my website is just my name, chrisruden.com. Just launched a huge thing with my protein bar company. It's also run by Type 1s, and that's just NRG Bite, so you can check us out on Instagram or anything like that. I do have a book coming out in April, and I can't show it yet, but I do have it right here, and I can't show it yet.
Teasing us.
But if it was a possibility, I'm excited to just share that stuff because it's all stuff that helps me personally on a daily basis. And I just feel like we all have a story or value to share, and it's your job to share that, because that one perspective, this video, podcast, whatever you do, might change a person's perspective that could change their life.
Totally. So if you want more of Chris Ruden, go find him on all those different places. There's a sweet book coming out in the near future, not out yet. But if you want more of Chris Ruden, there is one place where you can find him. Chris, what's something coming up in a couple of weeks that we worked on?
So luckily, we were fortunate to do part of the summit together. So we did an epic interview and super value packed, just like this, but even more in depth. And I'd love for you guys all to check that out and just give your feedback. If that's something that you enjoy or something that you took from it, we'd love to hear. And I'm excited for you guys to see that.
Yeah, so we got 30 plus experts, just like my buddy Chris Ruden here, who came and answered one question about their type 1 diabetes. I won't spoil it just yet, but that one question dives into essentially how they would coach themselves on diabetes. Really interesting. So if you want to get more info on that, it's a free virtual summit that we're running over at fearlessdiabetic.com. Head over there now, enter your email, and you get access to all of those experts. I can't wait to see you guys over there. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, as always, to have a conversation with you, and cannot wait to see your book launch. It's going to be exciting.
Looking forward to everything, man. Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. So everybody else, remember, go to fearlessdiabetic.com, get free access to that summit and more of Chris Ruden. We'll see you guys there. Keep up the fight.